Well, as soon as I saw you coming in, I prayed that you'd come over and talk to me. You know, a handsome guy like you arriving right here?
Because...
You are really broad-shouldered. Do you work out at a gym?
Well...
Yep, I'd do her.
Sometimes...
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, I am SocioPsycho, and today we look at Shadows of the Vatican Part 1 of a 4-part series. Now, 1 is available on Steam and the other 3 are coming. This is an adventure game in a detective manner, available for PC, created by 10th Art Studios and Adventure Productions. Now, when you start up, it's very important that you go into the system folder and make sure you're playing a proper game, as when you get the download of the game, you'll have an SD, which is standard definition, and an HD, high definition. You need to go into HD if you're playing on a larger screen resolutions like 1920 by 1080, as both of the games have separate save files, so if you start in standard definition, your save file will not cross over to high definition. It's very important that you realize and make sure you're playing in the right mode. This is why I'm showing it to you like this, so you can understand what I'm talking about. The game settings itself is very simplistic in its understanding of what it wants screen-wise and color anti-aliasing, as you can see. Now, when we go into the options of the game itself, you have shadows, dialogue box, and different music and sound sliders. The music in this game is very impressive and nicely done. It's really the best quality of the game. In some parts of the story though, it doesn't carry over where it should, and it leaves the story feeling a little lacking, with no real background incentive and the music scale. And the game runs at a smooth 60 frames per second, and I have not had any crashes or technical issues which prevent me from playing the game in any fashion. And I'll do my best, as always, to make sure that I convey what I'm trying to say to you without ruining the experience or the puzzles in the game, as it is adventure based. So with that said, let us jump in and show you exactly what the game has to offer. Now, the game is set in a modern-esque world upon where you're an ex-priest being called back by one of your friends in order to help in a case of mystery surrounding the church. As the problems and the story progresses forward in different segments of a picture cinematic after you complete parts of the game, almost looking as a comic book feel, which is nicely done, you become the lead detective in trying to figure out what's happening. When you create an adventure game, you have a few choices upon which direction you want to go with it. You can either go adventure, platforming, puzzle, detective. There are different variations and different paths you could take. This one went with a detective path. So it's important to know that it gets the story and the detective element right for it to be successful. It does a very well done job in the beginning of the game of giving the player the tools needed by a quickly run over of how to access the interface with no issues. And the inventory is very easy to navigate, as you just bring your mouse up to the top of the screen, open your inventory, and being able to look through your items or combine items if you need to. And it fell into the story, so it did not feel out of place. And when we talk about the story itself, in the basis of what you want from an adventure game, do you understand who you are? Do you understand what you're doing here, what your backstory is, who you're talking to, a variation of information ranging in depth to shallow upon their backstory, why you're doing what you're doing, and the purpose of doing what you're doing? This game fulfills and accepts those parameters very well. Now, from what I've been able to tell, the studio that have created this is a pretty small studio. And for the most part, I would say easily 90% of the voice acting you'll hear in the game is carried out to a manner of professionalism. There are a few parts where it doesn't sound like the character has much feeling or heart, or as if they're just simply reading lines. There's also some minor technical issues with echoing and other issues on very small pieces of audio. But this was not the experience overall. As I said, 90% of the audio was done rather well, and I'll let you be the judge of that for yourself.
Lunch hall. Oh my God, I hope I'm not thrown out after what happened today. Listen, young man, this is a decent place. And if someone knew I wasn't careful enough, well, I haven't done anything wrong, right? It was just an accident. Please don't spread the news around.
I won't, sister. I am a discreet person, and I know it wasn't your fault. The concern...
When it comes down to the writing in the game and how the story pieces itself together, there are some inconsistencies or missing factors of logic. There are times of the writing where it feels a little forced. Now, this can be related to the fact that it is a religious atmospheric game, and while this is not a bash on religion, it does try to justify, logically, religional arguments in the game without the correct response from a character, ex-priest, meaning that you went away from the church and your religion. It feels like it tries to justify the role of the religion in an illogical fashion, but as a detective, and the things that they're saying and forcing upon you in a logical fashion does not fit the character that you're playing, one who is a non-believer. You can easily see many of the disconnecting, fanatic personalities in the conversations you hold with people, which is a little bit frustrating at times, seeing how your character is very passive to it, even if he is an ex-priest. Graphically, the game is where it does suffer. The game's animational quality upon how the characters move, pick up items, walk, and interact with their world is borderline laughable. It's like controlling a bunch of Barbie dolls without the ability to take the game seriously. And while graphics are not everything, this is a deterrent on the availability for people to play the game. While the still images in the backgrounds may be well drawn out, the game suffers from a severe lack of animational quality. But in an adventure game, that doesn't always matter. And as the movements may be a deterrent or laughable at best, it doesn't affect exactly how you get around the world, minus a few silly and unneeded car chase scenes, which are just mind-boggling as to why they would even be in there, in a jokingly artistic fashion that they have been put in there, where it doesn't come down to skill or knowledge, but more just a randomization or luck that you selected the right path, a fail and start again. It was a poor developmental choice of a car chase to put that in there. There are disconnects in the story which do acknowledge itself in the animation. If you need to put an item hidden away to lure a guard away from a post, and this item makes noise, the guard will walk up and down looking for that location, never being able to hone in on it. This doesn't make sense at all. There's a serious disbelief in a lot of how the story is written and how you interact with objects in the world. At one moment he'll say, I cannot take this item because they will understand or know that I am here. But I can take part of the item because they won't notice that half of the item is gone, but they notice all of the item. These little inconsistencies build up to making the game less fun. But the real damage is done by the fact that it does take itself more as a detective game rather than anything else. And while making your game a detective game is perfectly fine, because the difference in between a detective game and a puzzle game is varied as, well, if it's a puzzle, I have 6 pieces of a picture. I put these 6 pieces together, and then I rotate them to make a symbol, and I open the door. Where a detective has either figured out the clues from talking to somebody, or reading a book, and understands and is able to answer a riddle, and uses more wits and cleverness in the game in a non-puzzle fashion. The problem comes from the fact that the game relies heavily upon using a multitude of tiny little objects which you must then see in order to progress forward. There is no hint system in the game, and while that's perfectly fine, it doesn't carry for that lack of in a manner of personally having the character reply to an inquiry that you click on an object and it would say more upon what the character is thinking. No, I cannot take this book. The person it belongs to might be angry. Instead, they say a more meaningless subject such as, that does not belong to me, or I cannot steal this. The game suffers greatly from a lack of capability to understand what your next step is going. And when you're talking about being a detective-based game, figuring out where the problems are, what is going on, it is very important to know that your first step leads into your second step, which follows into your third step. But finding your steps is the difficult part. The seams of logic don't make exact sense. If you need to give somebody an object in order to get an object from them, and you give them the item, and then your character says, well, why would I do that? Why would I give them this item? It then follows up to, oh, I can give them the item they require, but only after I jump on one leg and juggle in front of them. I am not able to skip other steps. I have to complete Part A, Part B, and Part C before I'm able to do Part D, even though those other 3 parts are irrelevant. This leaves you with a confusion at times upon what to do next, where to go next, and how to interact with the world. It's always minor little hints and clues that you need to find and piece them together, and while that may be good in a detective fashion, how these clues are related to you and how you interact with the world is so linear and hand-holding that it ruins the experience. The game is not necessarily long, nor is it hard. The game runs for about 2 hours and it is Chapter 1 of 4, but each chapter will be handed out for about $6 to $7. And while you end at Chapter 1 and it seems to allow you to play going into Chapter 2 as a new character and through a different perspective, or that's the hint that it would give you, it doesn't feel as if it has enough excitement or enjoyment, as the atmosphere is a bit clunky in how you move around and interact and discover what you need to in order to succeed. When you play an adventure game, it does come down to one's personal taste. Do I like the art style? Do I enjoy the theme of the game? And while I was happy playing the theme and the art style, I had to ask myself, would I purchase the Part 2 when it came available on Steam? And after long and hard consideration, I myself would not purchase Part 2. The way the story is written, the game has a severe lack of disconnect in between how you interact with the world, how you understand where you need to go next, how you relate on a personal and emotional level with the character, how the atmosphere is not always consistent in the music being lacking, even though the music overall, when it does play, is a very nice and powerful soundtrack. The story progressional manner of it is very linear. You're not able to accidentally stumble upon completing a task further down the line that is relevant to the task that you're working on. You cannot have a hint button and click, well, maybe I should do this now. When you click on an item, say you need to pick up a book, he doesn't say why he can't pick up the book that is prevalent to the information regarding to the task you're trying to complete. But once you talk to somebody or flip a switch somewhere else, then all of a sudden he's able to pick up a book. It's these minor annoyances which never allow you to connect with your character and feel like you understand where he's coming from, as he's a programmed machine demanding to be able to do one task at a time before he can go on to doing another. And while it may carry out, for the most part, the story element okay, with leaving a few gaps in the writing to be less than desired, it fails on the detective aspect. It has been a hard decision, even now speaking these words, but I find it incredibly difficult to actually be able to recommend this game to you, based off of how it plays. The adventure aspect of the game, in the story manner, is not all that exciting, and it doesn't make you feel like your time is being respected, as you have no emotional connection with the character. I found the most exciting part of this story to actually be the last 5 minutes of the game, which was more of a teaser for Act 2. How good Act 2 is, I do not know, but with how lackluster the first one is, it's not inviting. It's more of a surplus of finding a bunch of little items and placing them in the right orders of talking to people, rather than deducting clues in a grand scheme. If the game is on sale, and you really love adventure games, then perhaps this is one to look into, but for a full price release, it's too difficult for me to recommend. I thank you for watching, for I've been SocioPsycho, and I'll see you next time.